This is Pod Populi.
Podcast for the people.
All right. Well, hello, Evan. It's good to see you. Thank you for coming on the Born or Made podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing great.
Good.
Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, I'm very excited to have you. So first thing I'd like to ask everybody is, so where were you born?
Youngstown, Ohio.
Ohio. Okay, so you're now in Florida. Okay, so tell me about Ohio as a kid growing up.
Well, I kind of grew up all over the Midwest.
Okay.
So Youngstown, moved from there to Grand Rapids, Michigan. Elementary school in Jackson, Michigan, which is South Central.
Okay.
Everybody knew that area. It was either Consumer Power or the prison, Southern Michigan
really?
Prison.
Okay. Those are the two big employers.
Those were the two big employers. And then moved from there to north suburb of Columbus, Ohio, in Westerville, and went to high school there in Westerville. And then just before my senior year, my dad got transferred out to New Jersey. So I spent my senior year in high school in Northwest New Jersey before going away to college.
Year. Okay.
Yeah.
So your dad, what was he doing? What did he do that had y'all move around?
My dad worked, he was an engineer, and he worked for one of the big oil companies. He started off with Sinclair Oil, and then it eventually was acquired by Atlantic Richfield, and then Atlantic Richfield had to divest some of the parts of the company because of the the government made them divest because they had a monopoly, and so then he finished his career with BP in New Jersey.
So there's oil in Michigan. Why were you in Michigan?
My dad ran a distribution facility.
Okay. All right. So you were moving.
Yeah. Oil byproducts and heating products. Okay, yeah, it's primarily what he was in.
Michigan, but I guess you got to have oil everywhere.
Yeah.
It's got how you get it there. We actually have a place that pops up out of the ground in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and people don't realize that. It's like when they had that big collapse or there's a big shutdown in Louisiana, our gas prices went up. Like,
oh yes.
Well, because there's a pipe that runs. People don't realize there are pipes that run from Louisiana to Fredericksburg, Virginia.
You're exactly
now, I'm
right.
sure there's a series of intersections, but it's like, people do not realize how much stuff is underground.
Yes.
Pumped across this country, and we just kind of like, it's great. Just show up the gas pump, and there it is.
You're exactly right.
So you graduate. You're in New Jersey.
New Jersey.
And then, so you're going to college.
Yes.
All right. So what are you going to college for?
I went to the United States Military Academy at West Point.
So you were West Point.
Yes.
So you had pretty good grades.
In high school, yes.
Yeah.
And
you wanted to go in the military at that point. By that time of your life, that's what you thought you wanted to do.
I think what I knew I wanted to be an engineer.
Okay.
And I knew I wanted to go to college. I wanted to get an engineering degree. Had a number of different scholarship opportunities, a number of schools all across the country. But from an early age, I had always played around with toy soldiers. Your G.I. Joes.
Yeah.
And, my parents would get us Army surplus stuff, the helmets and the ammo belts.
You did all that. Okay,
and,
okay.
My brothers and I would go play out in the field out back. And I think it was my junior year of high school, over the summer, when I was taking my brother out to Notre Dame for his freshman year. This is my brother that's a year older than me. We stopped at a friend's house, and he was telling me, he says, oh, yeah, I just finished a year at the United States Military Academy prep school, and next year I'm going up to West Point. And he was telling me about it, and I was just enamored at that point. And I'm going, gee, I didn't know that they did all this, and, I knew that there was an Army-Navy game and football. And so when I got home, I looked into it, went through the application process, and got accepted. And my parents were going, well, they're still holding this scholarship for you here and there. Are you sure this is really what you want to do?
Sure, yeah, there's a little bit of fear. Yeah.
And I think after that freshman summer, because you have what they call a beast barracks, your first 2 months, I think the day after the 4th of July, the 5th of July, is when I actually went in and started school.
So is it almost like a basic training at that point?
It was similar to a basic training.
Because you're going to be an officer when you
Correct.
This. Correct. Okay. All right.
And so you go for the first 2 months before school starts, and all the other cadets, the upperclassmen, come back, from whatever assignments they're on or doing before you start the academic year.
So they're there from that July 5th there as well?
Only some of them, only the cadre.
Okay.
So September is when everybody comes back and you start the regular academic school year.
So you become a student at that point.
Right.
Okay.
And it was at that point where, my parents would call me, and a couple of, engineering heads of the department said, hey, we'll hold your scholarship. And finally it got to the point where I said, I've gone through so much these last 2 months.
This is why you're still basically in basic training.
This is while I'm still in basic.
Trying to get you.
They're still trying to get me. And my parents weren't quite sure. They thought that I went there because I have 3 older siblings, and we're all a year apart. So I had a sister that was a senior at Ohio State, a brother that was a junior at Miami of Ohio, a brother that was a sophomore at Notre Dame. And I'm going, okay, I can count pretty well. There's no more money left for Evan.
That's right. Yeah.
to go to school. So it's scholarship driven at this point. And I turned down a couple of universities just because even though they offered me scholarships, I knew I would be able to afford it for 2 years. But then come year 3 or year 4, I'm going, even working full time, I still wouldn't be able to afford it. And I don't want to take that scholarship money away from somebody else that's just as deserving. So some of them I turned down real early. A couple of them I wanted to keep my options open. And then come September, I said, I've never quit at anything that I've done. I said, this is really, really a challenge here. And I'm going to stick with it and see how things play out. And so,
And arguably one of the best educations in the world. When you throw the education and the discipline factor, that's a heck of a degree.
It's interesting that you mention that, because while you're there, you never think that. It wasn't until after you graduate and 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 years later, every year that you think about that and you go, wow, what an education, what an opportunity to develop your leadership skills. And more so, it taught you about different people and personalities. And I always joke with people. I tell folks, I was on the dean's list for all 4 years that I was there. It's not the dean's list that you're thinking of. I was on the dean's other list for all 4 years.
The wrong dean's list.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so what they instilled in you at the academy was, even though you struggled in certain areas, they would try and team you up with somebody whose skill was in that area that you needed help with. And so you could always ask for help. So they would strategically room you with a roommate that was good in English or good in math to help kind of tutor you.
The opposite. You could help.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. So if I knew a foreign language or Spanish, I could help my roommate with their Spanish homework. And so for 4 years, it was like that. And it gave me the innate skill of, okay, I know I'm never going to be good at this, or this, but I know how to find people that are good in those areas. And
which is a great life lesson.
And again, as you're going through that process, you don't think as to how it's going to benefit you later on in your life or your career. But looking back, when I got out of the military and I started running businesses, it really came in handy to be able to say, okay, how are we structured? Is Tom the right guy to be in that position doing this, or are his skills better suited over here? And it really gave me that innate ability to be able to evaluate people, and instead of shuffling people out, just reshuffle their responsibilities, their duties and responsibilities to something that they enjoyed and that they were really good at, and to help the company grow and flourish. And it was always nice and very, very satisfying. And some of those people are lifelong friends now because they said, boy, I hated this. And there was, the pressure, I just couldn't get the knack of doing this. And when you moved me over into project management, boy, that was my sweet spot.
They prosper.
And they prospered, and the business prospered. So,
well, one good decision, right?
Yes,
It really was. So you finished. You get out of college, and you
right.
got a 6-year.
I had a 5-year commitment.
Okay, so you're doing that. So what do you do during that 5 years?
That's when I went to airborne school, Ranger school, did my officer basic training out in Oklahoma. I was an artillery officer, and a lot of risk and reward, because every round that went down range, we would joke about it, but we would have the phrase, every round that goes down range, you're betting your bars, because if one's not accurate, you could be out. If that
realize, so we have Dahlgren, there, that's a testing facility.
Yes.
So we were there down on that river one day, and they take these sections and they shoot live rounds.
Yes.
Dang river. People talk, if I was in war, I'd burn. It's like, have you ever heard one of those things go off? And like, well, no, not really. I said, yeah, they're a lot louder than they are on TV.
Yes.
And my dad was on a destroyer. Back then, this was in the 60s, late 50s and 60s. They literally would put cigarette butts in there.
Yes.
Because they didn't. And I said, I was like, Dad, how do you still hear? And he goes, well, we stuck those in there. We'd try to cover our ears. But he said they would shoot all those guns at one time, and it would literally move the boat sideways.
Absolutely.
And you think about those things, so when you're talking about that, when you were saying that, I thought you were going to say, if that sucker blew up and didn't go down range, you were all going to die.
Well,
too, because, these things
you had to be very careful
violent.
of that also.
Yeah, when you see those things on TV and these shells, I'll call it a casing because I don't know what it's called, but
yeah,
that's just. And then I guess some of those y'all pack with these big cotton drums, or what are those things?
Well, what those are is that's actually your powder, your gunpowder, in what they call charges. So you put the round in, you put the number of charges you're going to need to send it so many miles down range, and close the breech and fire.
Like a firing pin, or I guess there's
Yes.
some sort of igniter.
Yes.
Something like that.
Yeah.
All right. Did you ever actually have to go to war?
No.
Okay. All right.
No, I've never been in combat. Thank the Lord.
Yeah, thank God for that. I don't think that anybody wishes that on anybody.
So it's been always all around me, but I've never actually been deployed into a combat zone.
So you get done with your requirement.
Yes.
So you got your 5 years in. So now you're 27, 28, 29.
Yeah, it was about 27. Yeah. I decided to stay in for a few more years.
Oh, you did? Okay.
For another assignment. My first 4 years, I was on the East-West German border in Germany. And then my second assignment, I was out in Fort Ord or Monterey, California. Got sent over to Korea for several months and was in the DMZ there. And then after my 4 years out in Monterey, that's when I decided to separate from the military because I got to the point where I wanted more control over my own destiny, and the military wouldn't quite allow me to do that.
You sign a piece of paper that says you don't have that, right?
That's right. Yeah. And so left the military, went into business, started with Johnson & Johnson Pharmaceuticals.
Small company. Now, do you have an engineering degree at this point? Did you go through and get the engineering? Or?
I had my engineering degree from West Point.
Okay.
And
so is it like chemical, structural, electrical?
I actually had a general engineering degree.
Say you're general.
So I had a little bit of everything.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And it was nice. Worked for J&J for a number of years, and
where
then
are you at now? What part of the country? Are you still out west?
This was in Pittsburgh.
Okay, so you came back out
So
here.
I came back to Pittsburgh, was just traveling so much, had a young son.
So you're married at this point?
Yes.
Wife, and you got a little boy now? Okay.
And
so life is happening now.
And it got to the point to where, Halloween comes along. It's my son's first Halloween, and I have to take my wife and take like one of the executives of the company who was coming into Pittsburgh for the weekend or for a couple of days to work with me. So that took priority over family. And that's when it kind of dawned on me, okay, do I really want to climb a corporate ladder where they're controlling more and more of my time and how I utilize that time? And I said, I need a change. And that's when I left J&J and went to work for NASA. They're in Cleveland.
It's still a huge, that's a government agency too.
So it's a government agency.
Massive.
Big change. But I said, listen, this allows me to use some of my engineering degree, get the family better situated. I'm not traveling as much. And the 5 years with NASA was just a godsend. It was a lot of fun. Got to do a lot of different things, single type projects that are still in space today, powering the International Space Station.
Florida?
No.
So
no.
where were you at?
This was still up in Cleveland at
NASA. You clearly, I don't know anything about NASA.
Well, they have a big research and development center. It's now the John Glenn Research and Development Center. So it was communication systems and air breathing systems. So all the jet engines, we were the foremost at the forefront. And then we had big wind tunnels. So we had one of two icing research wind tunnels probably in the world. The Russians had the other, and we had it there in Cleveland.
Big was that thing?
Actually, the test area is probably about as big as this room.
Really?
But all the piping,
conditioning,
all the piping that goes for the airflow and getting the air quality and so on would probably take up about 2 city blocks.
Because you're creating icing conditions?
Yes.
So you're taking an engine?
We're taking an engine,
running it,
putting it through icing conditions.
See how it reacts.
We're putting
leading edges of wings.
Mm-hmm. And even rotors for rotary wing aircraft also.
Of course.
And so that's where a lot of the, Goodyear, Goodrich has the little, what they call the pneumatic bumps on the front edge.
Yeah, boots, de-icing.
The boots, de-icing boots. Mm-hmm. So a lot of that is where that came from, that technology, came from the NASA's research and development centers.
So my race car has a cooling system in it now?
Yes.
It's about this big, and it's for cooling for your shirt system?
Yes.
It's literally, and I asked the guy, I said, where did they get this? And he goes, NASA.
That's right.
So and the thing is, it's in my car now. Y'all were probably developing that 30, 40, 50 years ago. I mean, people don't realize Velcro.
Velcro, carbon fiber, titanium, all the technology for golf clubs. It came out of NASA.
Yeah, we don't even think about that kind of stuff. We just
Yeah.
no big deal.
Yeah.
So carbon was too.
Yeah.
No kidding. And titanium.
And titanium.
Because I just got my first car that has carbon doors, and first of all, it's crazy expensive, but luckily it came with the car. And
Oh, yes.
A very old car, but it is crazy how light that stuff is
Absolutely.
and strong.
Absolutely.
And it was all done through
All the materials testing that they had in the labs. It was really an education for me. And it
you came
was
in a
amazing.
place of value, and you were getting paid for it.
Right.
So you do NASA. You're there 5 years.
Yes.
You're still in Ohio.
Still in Ohio.
Okay, so now you're like, I'm done with NASA because you want to do something different, or did opportunity come?
It got to the point to where I was maxed out in my pay grade.
Yeah.
And my boss and my boss's boss were all about the same age.
I was going to say, if they weren't very old, you can see the writing on the
I'm thinking, okay,
They're not leaving.
they're not leaving.
Yeah.
So, plus, I didn't want to lose what I call my competitive edge. I always drove myself to be very goal oriented and achieve certain goals. Whether it be in life or monetarily, or things that I wanted to acquire. And I said, I'm not going to get there from here. And the next day, a roommate of mine from college, from West Point, gives me a call out of the blue.
Okay.
Says, hey, I may have an opportunity for you in Chicago. And I go, Bill, you must have caught me at the right time. I said, but it's got to be a good opportunity.
But you're still only 30s.
I'm let me see, how old was I?
35, 36 at that point?
I was about, let me see.
Maybe 38?
Yeah, about 33, about 35.
Okay, about 35.
Yeah,
That's
about
what I was in my mind.
35.
I was about 35, okay.
Yeah.
And you got one son still?
Son and a daughter.
Okay, so now you're really getting in
Yeah.
the throes of life.
Right.
Getting busy.
So my son was 5, my daughter was 2, and I said, okay, let me check this one out. Flew up there. The company was probably about a $10 million company in the audio, video, and web conferencing arena. So we did conference calls.
So let me do the math on that. Okay, so holy cow. I mean, that was cutting edge technology.
It was cutting edge technology back then. And
Because that would have been 85-ish then, right?
it would have been,
Is that
let me
right?
see.
It would've been 80s.
No, this would have been like 92, 91, 92.
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to do all the math because you're just a little bit older than me, so that would have been
Yes.
okay. All right.
Yeah. So,
Wow, this thing that we just like, oh, no big deal now.
yeah,
That was like the new thing now. Okay.
that was like the new thing.
Okay.
And went out there. I think what kind of impressed me was this was a company that was owned by a publicly traded company on the NASDAQ.
So you had funding.
So there was funding already there. They already had a book of business. They just needed somebody to come in and help them grow.
So are you going into sales? You going into management? Or you?
I was going into management. So I was like the number 2 in the company, like the
I
COO,
would say COO now. Okay.
and grew it from about $11 million company to about a $70 million company.
Okay. So
And
1990s, that was
Yeah.
that was still a big company.
We were the number 1 in the middle market. The only companies that were bigger than us were AT&T, MCI, and Sprint. So we basically dominated the middle market, and we were very good at what we did, and we didn't have all the big overhead that AT&T had.
You were nimble.
Yeah. And so
And you were profitable.
right, profitable. Had 2 offices in Chicago. Had an international office in Dublin, Ireland. And then
Tax reasons.
no, we
You
just
actually did
wanted
stuff over
to
there?
expand into the European
European.
area.
And that's where.
And Ireland covered all the European languages, and they were kind of wanting to grow into the call center type business, and we just had the technology. We just needed the people to help us. And
But y'all are living somewhere in the Chicago metro.
yes, yeah.
Wife, 2 kids.
Yep.
Okay. And how long were you there?
20 years.
Oh, okay.
So in
Okay.
Chicago, 20 years. The longest Linda and I had ever lived in one place in our entire lives, both of us. And so 9/11 came along. I was still in the Army Reserves.
Really?
So, I left active duty after 8 years, but stayed in the Army Reserves because I just enjoyed what I did, enjoyed the camaraderie. It just didn't give me the right satisfaction. I couldn't achieve the goals that I needed to achieve by staying in the military. And 9/11 came about.
Changes.
My unit deployed 2 days later.
With you?
Yes, I was in a small 20-person detachment.
So you're a company man one day. And
2
you're
days
shipping out.
2 days later, I shipped out.
And where do you go?
I went to Virginia,
Okay.
and then went from Virginia to the Middle East.
Where'd you go to Virginia at?
Charlottesville.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's a
What's
small,
over there? Yeah, that's right. I live in Fredericksburg. So.
the National Ground Intelligence Center.
Okay.
So I was doing military intelligence type.
So a buddy of mine
type
works for
work.
Algren. He works for JWAC, and they sneak
Yes,
in there a lot
that's right.
and out of there all the time because he
Yep.
was 9/11, and they didn't come home.
Yeah.
He did not come home for like a week.
Yeah,
He stayed at Algren,
Yep.
apparently, underground or whatever.
That's right.
So what the rumors are. Of course, he never could tell you. But that's he. But he did. He went to Charlottesville all the time.
yeah.
So it's all
Yeah.
part of that. So you
Yep.
go there, you lay the groundwork. So how long were you there in Charlottesville?
I was there for just over a year, and then I retired. In 2002, my time came up in the military where they said, "Okay, Evan, you're out."
Now, are you gone for a year?
So I was gone for a year. When I was back in Virginia, I would fly the family out for a long weekend. But it was during those times I'm helping my son do his math homework over the phone.
Yeah, I can say he's got to be high schoolish at this point. Yeah,
He was like junior high.
Yeah.
He was
Okay.
junior high at the time. And so it was tough on Linda, my wife, while I was gone. And then when I came back, it was a completely different business environment. Our parent company had changed its whole board, whole new suite of executives there. Went up, met with them, and said, okay, they want to take the business in this direction. I want to go this direction. I said, so let's part company as friends. And I started my own business consulting for a year until my non-compete ran out. And as soon as it ran out, I had 3 or 4 clients that contacted me individually and said, Evan, if you start up something else in this same business after your non-compete is over, we'll sign up to be your client because we like you and we like what you did and how you took care of us. And, in business for me, it was always people, processes, and systems. You take care of those 3 areas and, make sure the people are happy. You take care of them. You give them all the tools that they need to succeed. They'll take care of the company, whether you're there or not.
That's right.
And sure enough, the year I was gone, the company just continued to march forward and do great
You
things.
have a great business when you can do that.
That's right.
You truly do.
But the new path they wanted to take, just I said, it's not the right financial thing to do. And
So you're still in Chicago.
so I'm still in Chicago, started up my own business after my non-compete was over, brought on a bunch of clients, and here 9 months later, two of those clients came to me and they said, Evan, your business model is synonymous with our business. Would you consider selling?
Really?
And I said, I'm open. I said, but it's, you know, it's kind of a cash cow. I hate to give up on a cash cow. And he says, well, we want you to stay in the business. And so I sold the business out, kept 10%.
Became an employee basically at that point.
Well,
theory.
And as it turned out, at the same time, another company that I had been consulting with said, Evan, would you consider coming on board? You know, we really need the help to grow. And this was...
You sell it, then you're out, but you retain 10%.
I sold it, retained 10%, would help advise every once in a while, and then came into another company that was in the same scenario, people, processes, and systems.
Different business, though? Or similar?
Very similar. It was in the communications industry and in the call center arena, to where we handled the reservations and customer service support for 4- and 5-star resort hotels around the world.
Were you doing it here?
This was based out of...
in the States?
Yes. We were headquartered in Chicago, but we had 22, grew it to about 22 offices in Canada. So we had a lot of our operations. I had 2,400 employees up in Canada.
Do you have to travel up there a lot? Or were you...
About every other week.
Okay, so you get back on the travel train.
Right.
Which after 9/11 got even worse. It's challenging.
You know, it wasn't so bad, and it was a lot of fun because, again, I got to work with a lot of people. You know, the processes and systems, always coming up with new ways of doing things more efficiently, and
that engineering brain
right.
of yours, yeah, for sure.
And we had clients such as American Express and NBC Universal Studios in Orlando,
small companies,
Trump Towers, and you know, some of the bigger chain hotels that had really boutique
those
resorts.
Were your customers.
These were our clients, and so because we focused in so much on our staff. You know, a lot of companies in the what they would call the call center space, they just consider you a number.
That's right. Turnover.
You know, turnover is just nuts, almost 100% a year. And I said, well, I can't afford that. You know, I need my turnover to be 10% or less. And so we paid our staff well, but they produced well. And that's why clients kept coming to us, because we were good at sales. And we incentivized all the staff, and I would come up with, quarterly plans where, based on how the company did, we would pay out a quarterly bonus. Everybody, company-wide. And some would make it, some wouldn't. But we tell them, hey, here's why you didn't make it, or here's what you needed to do extra to hit that. And they would all work together in their teams, so the next quarter they did make it.
Got a bonus, yes, yeah, highly incentivized.
And so they controlled some of their own destiny. And it was, I'm going, okay.
It gives people buy-in too.
Right.
I mean,
right. That buy-in was huge. So did that, grew the company. We had an international center in Milan to cover the European area for language support. And then got to the point to where I'm going, okay, we're a service company. The value, if we were to spin it off or sell it, we're not going to get a very big multiple. But there's this technology company that's in the same space. We deal with the same clients. There's some synergy. So I got the board to consider a merger of the two. And so here we're merging a service company and a technology company together. A lot of our clients were the same. Merged it together. I took on a completely different role. Instead of being the president of the organization, I said, just put me in charge of business development and sales, because I already know all the clients anyway. And did that, and 18 months later, we were bought out. And
when you merged them, did you have some ownership in that?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
From
you had the 10% in the one. What happened to that one?
I always that one we just dissolved maybe about a year ago.
Okay, well, so you had that one a long time.
Oh, yeah. Oh, long time.
And then you get ownership in this, you merge.
Right.
So now you're getting, I throw a number, it doesn't matter. But instead of, having 40% of this number, now you may have 20%, but obviously a much larger
That's
number
right.
Creates more value.
That's right.
Okay.
And so I was in a scenario from when I left NASA. I said, if I'm going to put blood, sweat, and tears into an organization, I want to have some direct skin in the game. So that was a prerequisite in every position that I took from then on out. And
your resume, your track record,
yeah.
you could leverage that because
right.
you had a proven skill set.
So I thought I would retire.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that lasted about not even 60 days.
Really?
But it's business associates would find out, Evan's available, or they sold the company. What's so-and-so, or what's so-and-so doing?
Sure, yeah.
And so I would get pulled into a consulting assignment here or there, and it was nice. The kids were older. Kids were in college. We eventually moved down here to Florida because our shareholders in Chicago or in Illinois said, Evan, we're all Florida residents. We hate paying Illinois tax. Get the company ready to move down to Florida. So that's when we had an executive office in Naples and bought our first place down there. So whenever I traveled around, I always made sure Florida was one of those stops. And then after the company was sold, I said, hey, there's nothing keeping us in Illinois. Our youngest had just graduated from college, and we had always joked with them about saying, hey, when you two are in college, we're going to sell the house, buy an RV, and drive up to the front of your dorm or the front of your frat house and say, hey, can you do this laundry for me? Or there's no food in the fridge, type of scenario. And so sure enough, the house had already been sold before our daughter graduated. We didn't want to tell her till after graduation week and came down here. But then, again, one opportunity after the other, and a buddy of mine from Chicago, a fellow West Point grad, said, hey, Evan, we're looking at investing in a company there in Naples. It's going to be
You're living in Naples at
and
that point?
I'm living in Naples, and they said, would you mind doing some due diligence, helping us out here? And so I helped them out, and then they said, well, we need to find somebody to run the office and run everything. And I said, well, why not? I'll throw my hat in the ring. And I said it was a completely different field. It was association management. And so
As in like trade associations?
It was a company that managed condo and homeowner associations. And so
Which is not a bad area for Florida.
No, it's beautiful. I mean,
They're everywhere.
It was a sweet spot. So took that over. We had 4 other offices throughout different parts of Florida, but the Naples was the biggest, grew it. Got to the point to where I told the other 2 shareholders, I said, guys, unless we're willing to make this investment in just this office, in the staff, I said, it's not sustainable. And, it came to a big decision point, and I told him, here's the risks, here's the rewards, but unless the industry goes to this, you're going to be churning and burning through good people, and I don't want to be part of that. I want to build something that's going to last, leave some type of a legacy here, have it be a name brand, company, because I've been the name behind it, working with all these different boards and associations. And I said, if you're not willing to invest, let's find a white knight and get out. And sure enough, 3 months later, we got an unsolicited offer from a national chain. I told guys, take the money and run. They go, you don't know what the offer is. I says, I don't care what the offer is. I said, just take the money and run.
So how did you develop that skill of being able to analyze and understand things in such great detail, or have that? It sounds to me like you have an incredible ability to visualize like out. And I mean, is it the processes that get you to that? I mean, you have some sort of skill there that allows you to see something that a lot of people don't. Because what happens to so many people in business is they get the blinders on,
right,
and next thing you know, you get clobbered. The train had been coming.
That's right.
You just weren't paying attention.
That's right.
It sounds like you have an ability to see that potential.
I think I was really blessed because I always took an interest in what my dad did for business. And, he didn't mind telling me about what he did and how he did it and so on. And he recommended a book to me, and it was a Dale Carnegie book, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Or is it people or enemies? Was it How to Win Friends and
Influence People?
Okay.
And so I would read that just about every year. And just
made a point.
Just apply those principles into what I was doing, focusing on people, processes, and systems. I think the military ingrained that aspect into you.
Yeah, the military has. I saw that in my son. Not to digress, but when our oldest son was going in, she was like, I just don't know if they'll be. Josh can do this, or not saying Josh couldn't, but she's just, as a mom, she's worried. Right?
Oh yes.
I'm like, honey.
Oh yes.
One thing I know, my dad taught me. I said the military can take anybody, and when they kick them out the other side, they're all going to be exactly the same.
Yep.
And we saw that, and she was like, I cannot believe all these kids. And we started looking at their kids to us.
Yes.
And they literally, and Josh said, Dad, they can take gangbangers to a guy that's sucking his thumb. And when we came out the other side, every one of us were exactly the same.
That's true.
And that's, you got it even at a higher level because of the intensity of the education side and everything else. Everything, and I guess your days are pretty structured when you're in the military.
Yes.
Like, especially in a military school like that in West Point.
5:30, up and at 'em.
Yeah, there's no like, hey.
6 o'clock, PT, reveille.
You better make your bed.
Oh,
right. You're making
there's certain habits that you never get rid of. And making the bed, still to this day, first thing I do in the morning is make the bed. Linda will go, oh, I'll make it. No, go on. No, let me make it. It's just habit. And it's something that, gets the day going right. And, all these positive things, because the most difficult thing, you're setting your life's goals or certain goals, things that you want to achieve throughout your career. And you have to have interim steps. Otherwise, it's quite difficult, motivating.
Go from here to here.
Because when you're running the show, who's keeping you motivated? And that self motivation. So the goal setting, all these different things to keep you motivated. Even the think time. A lot of people, when I lived in Chicago, everybody had a lawn service. And my neighbor and I were the only two that cut our own lawns. And here he was like the number 2 or number 3 guy in the finance at Baker McKenzie, which is a global firm. And, you know, we'd sit down and chat, go, why do you mow the lawn? I said, it's my think time. You know, I can get on the mower, pop on my hearing protection.
Pretty brainless.
I said, it's brainless, just going back and forth, but it's my think time. I says, I get to think about, okay, what are we doing at the office here? What are we, how do I position this for the board for these investment decisions and so on? And it's that think time, and again, it's that self-motivation time to, you know, keep you motivated toward, you know, that next goal. And
did you write them down?
Oh, you have to.
Yeah, I did that. I wrote mine. 10. I had 10. I carried them in my wallet, actually.
I carried mine in my planner, and I had this takes me back to Medina, Ohio, on the little town square. They had a festival one weekend, and they had some cars on display. And there was a red Ferrari on display, and my little daughter, she was I think 2 or 3 at the time, had this red and white checked, you know,
perfect
dress on.
Yeah.
And she's standing next to it, and she goes, "Oh, Daddy, this is the car that, you know, you should get." And so I have a picture of her and me in front of this Ferrari.
Not with your cell phone.
Not with our cell phone.
Actually took work.
So this is an actual, you know, Kodak picture.
Yeah.
And I just kept that in my planner. And I said, okay, this is my 25-year goal. 25 years from now, I want to have this car or a Ferrari.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I probably could have done it at 20, but I hadn't quite reached those goals yet. Mm-hmm. And at 25, you know, my wife goes, well, you're going to go out and buy yourself this Ferrari. And I said, you know, I just one more thing I want to do, you know, that I added to the list. Says, let me get this done, and then I'll go pull the plug on this. And so it's that goal setting that you always have to have, you know, changing, updating it, modifying it, and that's always, you know, kept me grounded and focused on what needs to be done.
Not every one of your goals are monetarily, right? I mean, sometimes you just have goals of getting in better shape or learning a foreign language. You know, I had some crazy ones, you know, like wanted to ride in a hot air balloon, you know, just things that weren't like,
that's
right.
Right.
Everybody's like, oh, you know, I always wanted a 911 turbo. That was like my dream car since I was a kid, right? And I got one for, I guess, about 3 years ago. You know, and people are like, oh, you've done that. Yeah, it was just a goal. I just sold it. Just in the last 3 months, people are like, I can't believe you sold it. I'm like, it was a goal. It wasn't like, it was not it didn't define me. It was just, I put it out there and I worked incrementally to get to that point. And
That's right.
I think some people lose sight of that because everybody thinks goals are these big, you know, oh, I'm going to live on a, you know, $10 million house on the ocean. No, that's not what goals are. Just constantly making yourself just a little bit better for you, not for, you know, hopefully other people benefit from that. And I do think with the world today, we do get caught up in this, oh, we got to have all this, and it's not.
Yeah.
You know, I always say I'm just trying to be the best version of me that I can be.
Well, and to your point, passing those same values on to your children. You know, I wanted to, you know, I was telling Joe on the drive over, I said, the one requirement I had of my son and daughter, and I sat them down and said, you will go to college and you will get a college degree. I says, I don't care what college it is. I don't care what type of degree it is. I says, but you will do that one thing. And they both looked at me quizzically and they said, why that? You know, if we don't want to go to college, why would you force me to go? I said, because what that does is that proves that you know how to continue to learn. I said, that's all it proves. I said, that's why I don't care what degree you get.
That's right.
I says, you can show somebody down the road that you continue to have the ability to learn. And you're always learning throughout your career.
Your life, right? I mean, you're learning constantly, especially today.
Oh.
Because it's just, people don't realize. I mean, you remember, getting the Sears and Roebuck catalog. I mean, you imagine looking through a set of encyclopedias. We had one set of encyclopedias in our entire family.
Yes.
It was my grandparents.
Yes.
And we would go to their house as little kids and look where Africa was and look, because you didn't see it on TV.
That's right.
And the thing now, we can do it instantaneously.
That's right.
And just the amount of information. Now, sometimes it's information overload. But, yeah, I read a great book. I don't remember the name of it, but one of the things the guy talked about was like, that's one of our fallacies is that people think, oh, I got a college degree, and they quit learning.
Right.
And you should learn, like you said, all the time. And I think it's a great life lesson to teach your children, and hopefully people listening to this would understand that. I mean, we don't do that enough, and especially like as well as I know, just it's so easy. Can you imagine going to learn how to be an engineer today compared to when you were doing? I mean, you were looking through books and case studies and trying to understand how this stuff worked, and now you can just
slide rules.
Could you imagine? I mean, I'd like to find one of those and show that to I have a really smart oldest granddaughter, and she is a math whiz, and I'd be fun to show her a slide rule.
They would eat it up.
She probably would.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think they use any of that stuff anymore.
No.
Yeah, we don't even, simplest thing is scales anymore. We don't even use scales anymore, just on, blueprints and stuff like that.
Yeah, and it's, the values, I think, the motto at West Point is, you won't lie, cheat, steal, no tolerate those who do. And that carried throughout, my life and business, because, I would come across people that were a heck of a lot smarter than me, but when it came to business sense, they didn't have any. Mm-hmm. They were like a fish out of water. Or I'd come across some sharp business people that weren't very ethical. And I had to make sure that I kept the business, at arm's length from those individuals and advised the board and the other investors appropriately.
That's great advice, just life. I trademarked do what's right. And people don't realize, first, it's biblical. Secondly, it's reminding myself, not only this biblical, but that doing the right thing is critical. And sometimes you have to walk away in times that you question, like, man, because there's such an opportunity, right? A short-term opportunity.
Yes. To
sell yourself for that. And so I have that on all my vehicles, or the company, everything I have, and it's just a constant reminder that you got to do the right thing. It's not always the easy thing, but it's always the right thing. And that's something that it's easy to sell against now because there's just this incredible amount of, disruption in our lives and the world and stuff like that. And I think even, talking about that is incredible to let people always remember that. Because, you think about if you would have given up that one time, it could have changed your trajectory.
Yes, absolutely.
Immensely. Like, in not only your trajectory, but Linda, your wife, your son, and your daughters.
Right. You're absolutely correct.
And that's just you can't emphasize that enough to people.
Well, and that motto, it's interesting.
I've never heard that. I think I'd heard it, but it's pretty freaking simple, right? It's not like you go, oh, that's just, you're like, okay, that kind of makes sense.
It really resonates because the company that I've been consulting with for the last 4 or 5 years is a roofing, or they're a general contractor. I've been running the roofing division for them, and their motto is, we do the right things right. And the prior company, that did the association management, they were my go-to company because I always knew that they would get the job done right and they would do a quality job at a quality price. They wouldn't gouge me. They wouldn't be the lowest bidder. They wouldn't be the highest. They'd give me a fair price for it, but I could always depend on them.
And as a business guy, you know, hey, you got to make a profit.
That's right.
Like, oh, I want the cheap. Okay.
And when I started consulting for them, I mean, the roofing division, I think it was maybe a couple million a year.
And that's a hard business.
Very difficult.
Yes.
And I call it a dirty business.
It is, absolutely. It's one of those like mine. It ain't sexy.
No.
And it's dirty. And
it's definitely not sexy.
A lot of labor.
And it's hard work. And
are you installing or are you a roofing distributor?
We're an installer. Oh. And so
that's even worse. Like that is just such a hard business.
You know, I tell folks, I said, the only reason I'm here with this firm, I says, is because of the great work that they did for me, and they were always honest and fair. And I said, I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of all the contractors here in Southwest Florida. And I said, a lot of people wanted to take me to lunch and go on this boondoggle or this fishing trip or fly me here or there because we did a lot of contracting services and we were influential in who the association eventually selected. And plus I was an engineer. They go, Evan, you're the engineer. Who would you select? And
so that was all tied to that. Wow.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I see it.
And so, you know, I would just sit down, you know, with the folks and I would tell them, hey, you have to know that somebody is standing behind that and that they're going to do it right. And it's that level of trust. And I said, I wouldn't be here if that level of trust weren't there. I says, because, you know, not only is the owner of the company or the ownership group of the company standing behind that motto, I says, but so am I. I said, and the last thing I want to do is have a tarnished name or tarnished reputation. And I said, word of mouth spreads like wildfire down here.
Everything is still small.
That's right.
You know, we created like in my little industry, I mean, you know, we think, oh, you know, truss guys. And I mean, there's 1,200 truss plants in the entire United States.
That's right.
And most of them are owned by only a few people now. As you know, I can pick up the phone and find out within probably a couple of phone calls the real truth on someone or a business or
that's right.
something like that. And that's no different than what you're talking about. And honestly, it was that way when you were at NASA. How many guys are building rockets? How many guys are, you know, making, you know, jet engines? I mean, it doesn't take, you know, those, right? Those fan blades are not made by a lot of guys in garages, right?
I would tell folks, you know, after my time at NASA, I would joke with people. I said, you know, conferencing or, you know, taking a reservation and or putting a roof on. I said, it's not rocket science. But in case it is, or ever is, that's my background.
I'm the guy. I'm
your
man. That's right. I'm in. That's so funny. So now what are you doing? Roofing? Like, oh, so you're in NASA, and now you're roofing. That's quite the contrast.
But it's you know,
it's all business.
It's all business.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, you know, kind of goes back to that original Dale Carnegie book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, because it's really people meeting people. People aren't buying from you for that specific product. You know, they're buying from you because of you and how you represent them.
Because at the end of the day, there's 100 truss plants down here. You're still going to buy from me. There's several hundred roofers.
Yes.
Thousands. You know, it's like you were talking about the trust and stuff like that. Well, people don't, you know, think, oh, it's just roofing. Well, yeah, it's roofing until it rains.
Mm-hmm.
You've got water coming in because they did a bad job. And guess what? That may be 2, 3, 4, 6 months. Normally you start having issues after one cycle, which is 1 year.
That's right.
And that's when you find out, well, if the guy changed his phone number or was working out of a pickup truck, you got a problem.
Yep.
And that's the stuff, people, I want the cheapest price. And there's like certain things, and really anything, you just can't really cut corners.
Right.
You can get away with certain things. It's one thing buying a pair of tennis shoes or something like that. But roofing, flooring, plumbers, electricians. Well, electrician messes up. You may find out he did a bad job when your smoke alarms are going off and you have a fire in your wall.
That's right.
So it's the same thing. Well, we've been here a long time, so I got my final question for you.
Yes.
So do you think you were born or do you think you were made?
Absolutely made. 100%. Yeah.
There's no wrong answer. So that's okay. So why?
I think I've had the pleasure throughout my career of knowing really, really smart people, well-educated, well-schooled, and I've seen a lot of those people kind of fall by the wayside. And the people that are really taking the initiative, the go-getters, are the ones that are actively bettering themselves either through reading additional classes or,
even physical. Because it's all same process.
A lot of that is mental too.
Absolutely.
You got to keep sound mind, sound body. And I don't think people are born with those types of qualities or traits that naturally would propel them up to be that type of a leader. And I'd say it's more made. All the different things, the hurdles that you encounter throughout your life and career, whether it be business or family or religious, all weigh in on that. And so that's why, I always say you're made, not born.
Okay. That's cool. Yeah, I never know the answer I'm going to get. Like literally, I never know. And I've heard all of them.
I can believe that.
I've had a couple maids. So far, the maids are the most convincing ones. The born and made guys are more like me. I'm kind of born, kind of made. But I think you're the third guy now made. And it's like there never is any way. Well, kind of you're like, oh, made. You're just like boom, boom, boom.
Well, it's interesting because with my military background, you read about guys like Grant, MacArthur, Patton, Eisenhower, and a lot of people say they were born.
I read Patton's book, and I've read some stuff on Patton, and I'm telling you what, man, that guy was he was an intense guy.
Yes.
The thing is, I know we're talking about other stuff now, but you talk about a leader. Like you read these parts, he would be in the battle, and he'd jump out of his Jeep and help guys digging like freaking tanks out. And I'm thinking, tell me a guy that's not going to go run to the front line with that guy. Like
you're absolutely right.
You're going with that guy because he's not only that, he's going to be in front.
That's right.
So you're actually going to be following him anyway, so you might as well go. Even like Roosevelt, I read some of the stuff about Roosevelt. He was first, I think only, he had a freaking boxing ring in the White House.
Yeah.
Like he'd fight you.
Yeah.
And he was actually a very unathletic kid and had a lot of problems, stuff like that. I think he had asthma and he grew up, but some of these guys you read about and you're just like, wow, they were so cool. Well, one thing you did say that made me feel really good was that I'd still mow my grass. I do. I have a zero turn. I put my AirPods in and I listen to podcasts and I listen to audibles and and then sometimes if I have a bad day and I got to go mow, I'm like, wow, dang, if I could figure this out, if I could do that. And I'm like and next thing you know, I'm an hour and a half and I've almost mowed my whole place.
Yes.
And I had a situation come up a couple of weeks ago And I get real rung up really easy. Like, I just, so Cheryl's like, I'm going to go mow. She's like, okay. And she knows, and I come back in and she's like, well, how you feeling now? I'm like, I feel great. I figured it all out. She goes, oh my gosh. She goes, you're not even the same person. I'm like, well, I was able to work through the scenario, the problem, come up with a solution, and then I became at peace with it, because so much of this stuff you just got to let go, because so much you're not in control of anyway. And it was that the other day, and that's when you said that mowing, I was just the biggest well in my heart. I was like, oh, thank God, because I am 61 years old and I still mow my grass.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I love, now I've got a cool zero turn. I mean, I love zero turn. I love mowing grass. And until right before we moved out of our last house, we lived in 17 years, I mowed my grass. I've only had my grass mowed. We did it for a few months before because we were remodeling this little farmhouse. And when I was in Texas, we lived in New Braunfels, I push mowed a half an acre with St. Augustine.
Ooh.
Okay? That was like my workout.
Oh, that was a workout.
And,
especially in Texas.
My kids always laugh because, like, Dad, you always had, you didn't even have a light lawnmower. I'm like, nope, it had a self propeller, but it didn't have the chain.
Yeah.
So I would just push that. It was like my workout. And when we were moving to Virginia, I had to be gone a lot.
Yeah.
And we had to have somebody mow the grass in. And there is a great feeling though when I was doing that at our other house. I would drive in the driveway and I'd be like, God, that grass looks so good.
Oh yeah.
There's something about it. But now I live
yeah.
on a farm, so I got several acres.
Yes.
And so it is easy, and I enjoy it. Plus, I got that zero turn, which I just love. But there's something about when you do pull in and somebody else has done it, that is a good feeling. Though.
Yeah.